do some milling today. Figured I'd do a video. Had some questions about my last video, and thought I'd go over them because I think they were actually really good questions. Here's my phone for notes. Had to do with dry or wet cutting. So I really try not to run dry if I am using a lube. I think the blades stay sharper. So what I use for lube typically is just windshield washer fluid, and I use that as opposed to water generally because I'm too lazy to put the hose in the lube container. It's easier just to buy really cheap washer fluid and then put a cup of pinesol in a gallon or 2 gallons of washer fluid, and it helps cut the sap. So there's that. I've found that cutting through bark is generally a bad idea. It really dulls the blades pretty quickly. And so if you're going to cut through, whether you're cutting through bark or any part of the outer section of the log, even if you pull the bark off, you really want to be running a lot of lube. And so the best way to do that is actually to run the garden hose on it. You're only going to make a few cuts on the log that necessitate the garden hose, so you don't need to have it out all the time. But I just recently discovered that, and I think it's helped a lot with the longevity of the blades. I don't have a sharpener yet for my blades, so I'm not going to go over that yet because I'd like to have one, and maybe I can build one. We'll see. Next question. Alright, so I don't cut dry unless I forget. What mill to buy? A lot of people have a lot of confusion over mills and what's good for them, and what's a good mill and what's a bad mill, and all that stuff. That thing got windy. Maybe that'll help the mic. I don't know whether I'm going to capture audio here or not, but let's try it. It's still windy. So what mill to buy? There are many different brands that I've seen on the market. Wood-Mizer is probably the most well-known. Timber King, Hudson, Norwood. Heck, even Harbor Freight has a mill. Lynn Lumber has mills, and there are actually other smaller brands in there too. Those are bandsaw mills. Then you also have the style of mill like the Lucas mill, which is actually a blade, a circular saw blade that is swingable. So you can swing it anywhere from 90 degrees to 180 degrees or whatever it is. And I think there are probably a number of advantages to such a mill. There may be some disadvantages as well. So, what kind of mill, what style, what size, portable, not, a lot of options. Mills can range, the Harbor Freight mill I believe is under $2 grand. And for those guys that are thinking about doing a chainsaw mill, I would strongly advise against it. I like my chainsaws, but for milling, I wouldn't do it unless you had a very specific need in a very remote spot. You could only bring a chainsaw mill out there, and it was had a super big slab that you wanted to cut with just a chainsaw, but it's going to take you forever, and the wear and tear on chainsaws is enormous, and the sharpening and the mixing fuel. I mean, you need an enormous chainsaw, really, to do proper chainsaw milling. So you really need the biggest saw you can possibly find. And you're going to spend $1 grand or more just on a proper saw for milling, in my opinion. So if bandsaw mills are so inexpensive, then why aren't more people doing it? I think more people don't know that bandsaws are relatively expensive, or at least they can be. The reason that I bought the one that I have, which is the Woodland Mills, HM126 is the model number. They have their HM130 right now, and their updated HM126. I think they have a smaller one as well. But the reason that I bought that was it really seemed to be like the best bang for buck. And without spending, the next jump in quality, in my opinion, is probably to a Norwood mill. Just from looking at them, or to make something custom with a Lin mill. And that's going to cost you probably in the $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 range. The Woodland Mills Sawmill is $3,000 plus shipping. If you get the HM130 model, it's just under $4,000 plus shipping. And I have cut all kinds of stuff with it. What it won't do is it won't go over really big logs. So if you need a much wider mouth, then you have to look into other mills. Hudson makes mills that are wide mouths, so does Woodland. But what I found is I'm not cutting things that are really super wide. I'm not cutting super wide boards. It also gets into other interesting topics. Let's say you get a mill and it's huge and you can cut anything you want. Well, that's great. Well, how are you going to handle the logs? Log handling is an issue. Board storage is an issue. I'm going to get to that in the next question. Board storage is an issue. So I'm doing everything manually. I'm doing most of this by myself. My neighbor helps out when I need an extra hand, which is great. But by and large, I'm working on this stuff myself. So I have to physically be able to handle not just the logs, but the lumber that comes off the mill as well. So if I buy a mill that's enormous, it's going to handle logs that are this big around, how is that going to help me? It's not. Do I buy a $10,000 Woodmiser? Is it that much better in my application? Probably not. So I spent $3,000, and now I've updated the rails, which you'll be able to see in a minute. I've updated the rails, and now I can cut basically any length that I want. Certainly any length that I'm going to be able to cut. I'm going to want to cut. I did it all for $3,000. Plus a little bit extra here and there for steel and whatnot. So, I just watched a video recently that Wrangler Star did, and he was talking about, I guess somebody's sending him a Lucas mill to try, which sounds very interesting. The benefit to Lucas mill certainly is when you have a circular saw blade, all you got to do is sharpen those little teeth, and then you just keep on going. And Wrangler Star is right, the bandsaw blades are an issue. They do get dull. Usually I get a log or two out of them. How much are they? The bandsaw blades from Cook's Sawmill, another brand I didn't mention, sorry Cook's. Cook's makes pretty nice looking mills. From Cook's Sawmill I can get their Excel blades, 10 of them shipped for $165, so $16.50 a blade. And if I get a couple of logs out of it, that's really not too bad. If I hit a piece of metal, I'm going to be tossing the blade, but whatever. So $16.50 a blade. Heck, that's cheaper than most chainsaw blades. So why would you spend time sharpening a chainsaw blade if you can just throw a bandsaw blade on and have it go? So what mill to buy? I like the idea in the low price ranges. There's a number of options. I know Woodmiser has a relatively low dollar mill, somewhere around the $3,000-4,000 mark. I don't like it because I don't like the way that it attaches to the rails. It At least conceptually, it doesn't make any sense to me. So if you're talking about the $3,000 or $4,000 range, I really don't think there's anything better out there than the Woodland mills. I think for that kind of money, bang for buck, there's nothing better. All the features that you get, it's just they've really tried to think through at least most of the stuff, so that the mill is very straightforward, which I think is awesome. In the $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 range, you're probably looking at either Norwood or a Lynn lumber custom mill, which you can build yourself and determine what type of power you want on it and everything. I only have a 9.5 horse motor. I'd like more power, don't necessarily need it. I can cut up to 21 inches wide. Does it do it quickly? No. You have to push pretty hard, but it'll do it. So how much more power do you really need? One channel I love watching is Linda's Sawmill Cinema. Love watching them. They just do such a nice job. Linda is an amazing person, and just philosophically I have some interesting views. I do believe that in my dental office, the hardest job is done by the assistant. And at Linda's Sawmill Cinema, I believe that she probably does the hardest job, because she is doing essentially everything but the actual cutting. So you have to think so quickly on your feet and stay ahead of the sawyer. It's just what an amazing job she does. They have a wood miser, one of the traditional wood miser types. It's got a single rail, and instead of a 4-post 2-rail system, it's got a single rail with a cantilevered head and motor. Again, conceptually, that doesn't make any sense to me. Mechanically, I don't understand it. They hold their value very well. Obviously, people have some really absolutely brilliant results with them. Mechanically, doesn't make any sense to me. So, it doesn't really work for me personally, but they get great results. What they do have, very interesting, is an electric motor. An exceptionally powerful electric motor. That thing has got to be 20 or 30 horsepower. It is huge. When it starts up, when it goes, they can cut through anything and they can do it quickly. Done. Just beautiful. So I admire that, and I think if you have an ideal setup, it certainly would be with an electric motor in a fixed position, if at all possible. Those mills are going to run you probably in the $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 range, depending on how you outfit them. One reason why I like Norwood mill, at least in concept, I've never actually seen one, but I've seen the videos. One reason I do like them is that they have accessories for that mill, whatever you want. If you want a shingle jig, you can get it, which is cool. They have log turners. You can make it hydraulic if you want. You can make a trailer easily if you want. So if you want to go crazy with the money, the next step up from the Woodland mills, I think, is the Norwood. If you don't need all that stuff, spend $4,000 on the Woodland mills. Why not? You know, if you're, instead of chainsaw milling and just killing yourself, get a bandsaw mill and have fun. Very rarely in life I've seen things that are as fun as I thought they were. The sawmill is just as much fun as you can possibly imagine. It's a challenge, it's interesting, it's a unique experience every single cut. Every cut's unique. Just never know what's going to come out. Never know what's going to work, what isn't. Something's going to be I had one the other day, I was very disappointed. The log had a diagonal fracture through it. aggressively diagonal fraction, so the whole thing was shot. I couldn't use anything, nothing was usable. It was very disappointing to get that far in the log and realize you're in trouble. So which mill to buy? A low end, if you want to go real cheap, Harbor Freight. Woodland Mills is essentially an upgraded version of that. If you're going to spend under the 5 large mark, honestly, I believe Woodland Mills is the way to go. If you're going to spend over that, Norwood or Lynn. If you're going to spend more than that, at the 20 mark, you're probably looking at Cook's, Timber King, which I'm not super familiar with, or you can look at the Woodmeisters. I hope that helps people figure out what mills to buy. If you have any specific questions, I'll obviously put them down in the comments. All right, other questions? I had a guy comment, what, no more Volvo videos? Well, not for a while, I hope. I mean, I like the car. I'm going to keep it. I have a lot of miles on it. But I don't really want to work on it, so I don't drive it that much. I bought the Volvo with 132,000 miles on it, and the first year I drove it, I drove 30,000 miles in 1 year, and I spent on average at least $400 a month on parts because nobody had done that before. So I was playing catch up on that car in a huge way. And the parts weren't the problem. The money wasn't the problem. The problem was the time. I spent every weekend underneath that car for a year. And I didn't do lots of videos for it, and I apologize for that. I wasn't doing the YouTube stuff at the time. It certainly, if I do anything else with the Volvo, I'm definitely going to put videos up. I like doing videos and hope people find them useful. Keep in mind, I'm just stumbling forward just like everybody else. Because I'm not a mechanic, I'm a dentist by trade. So all this stuff is kind of new to me. I've learned a lot of stuff along the way, certainly. Sawing, I mean, I built this shed you see behind me. 90% of this, including the trim, is all milled lumber. Most of it's pine. Most of it I got for free. So I've spent a lot of time, effort, obviously, on it, and I've learned a lot. So I'm going to try to pass some of that along to you guys. Okay, next question was, why do you block the log? I think it's going to be easier for me to show you on the mill why I actually block logs, but I initially want to have very little waste at the outset. If I gotta waste some later, that's fine, but you don't want to get halfway through the log and realize you wasted a whole lot. So it has to do with how I figure out how to cut a log in the first place, how I approach the log, what I need. One thing I'll look for, if at all possible, is a really flat side to the log, and make that cut first, and try to make that cut as minimal as possible. Well, if you have one end of the log that's big and one end that's small, and a flat side, then what you want to do is you want to cut the flattest side of the log minimally to create a flat. And in order to do that, you have to actually tilt the log because one side's big, one side's small. You have to prop up that little side. And later, if you cut off excess, then it's not a big deal. But you don't want to do it necessarily at the outset because what if you needed it? So that's why I block the log, and it's more of a feel than anything else. I haven't done a lot of measuring when I actually cut. I need to do more of it. Sometimes snapping chalk lines is important. If you have lasers, like on Linda's Sawmill Cinema, they actually have lasers on their wood minder, and so the sawyer can see exactly where that blade is going to go all the way down the log, and he can just point and as soon as he's got a dog, he can just shoot, and that's really cool. I have that. So sometimes I get halfway through a log and I realize I've taken too big of a bite, and that's the way that goes. Just gotta keep going, and oh well. Okay. Another question, again, very good one, was there would happen to be a piece of scrap lumber and that had come off the mill, and it was a little on the thicker side, and one guy said, well, why didn't you make something out of that? And there's a number of reasons, and one of them was, I think there were a lot of knots in it, most likely, so cutting a 1x out of it probably wouldn't have been really productive. Another reason was I don't have the time to be making lots and lots of cuts. So, like, geez, do I try to get something out of that? Is it worth my time? Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it's better just to scrap it. More importantly, and this is going to segue us into kind of the next part here, is if I'm cutting a log, and I'm cutting it for 2x4s, then that also means that I'm storing the 2x4s. And if I get a random 1x, how am I going to store it? You know, I have half an acre here. I have lots and lots of acreage, so I have to make custom-made pallets for basically all of the lumber that I store. I have to store it dry. So what am I going to do with that? Now I'm going to include myself in this group. Most people that run sawmills, hobby mills, they just want to cut. Storing lumber, forget it. Drying lumber, forget it. Even building with it, forget it. I just want to cut. I just want, to produce lumber. Maybe sell it. Well, that's great. The problem is that you do actually have to store it. Once you cut it, you got to put it somewhere. And for me, it's just as much of an afterthought as anybody else, but when I'm cutting, I try to have a place where it's going to go, or I have a plan to have some time to make a pallet for storage. Okay, so about storage. Let's look at the storage that I have, and then we can kind of talk a little more about that. So right here you can see probably the most correct way to store lumber. I've got a custom-made pallet that is 12 feet long or whatever it is, and then we stack layers of wood that is a specific thickness, and then you use what are called stickers between them, roughly every 16 inches, 20 inches, whatever. Ideally, you actually want to put weight on the top layer as well. So if you're really nutty about all this stuff, then what you want to do is put probably some plywood on the top layer, stickers, then plywood, and then sandbags of some kind, concrete bags, whatever, and something heavy. You can even put lumber you don't care about on top, whatever. Ideally, you want weight on it to hold it. These pallets are 4 feet wide. If I just cut a 1x, I don't have a single one, well, I don't have very much there. So it's going to be a random board that gets shoved off to the side. I may or may not be able to use it. Now what I could do, and depends on whether I have time or not, is cut stickers. So if I happen to have a scrap piece of lumber, then it does make sense for me to cut at least some stickers so that I have these pieces for when I really need them. Again, stickers can be a bit of an afterthought, but I think it's a great way to also, as you're cutting logs, in the middle of cutting logs, you have to be thinking, geez, would cutting a sticker here makes more sense, because otherwise this piece is going to be wasted. So stickers only need to end up being 3-4 feet long, however wide you make the pallet. So if you're going to make stickers, increase your yield effectively out of the log because you're not wasting that lumber. So whenever I'm cutting, I'm always keeping in mind stickers. I'm keeping in mind what size I want, and there's also a feel for what the log wants to give you. The log tends to be able to tell you, yes, I'm going to give you 2x4s, or yes, this is really good for 2x8s, or 1-bys. Maybe you want 12-inch 1-bys for siding. So, for flooring. Next video I do, I'm going to actually do a little bit of milling and show you how I approach a specific log and problem solve it so that I get pretty good doing that. Anyway, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.